US President Barack Obama extends the hand of friendship to Cuba, and more rests as construction giant in Brazil, Odebrecht, faces corruption charges. Those are our headlines. My name is Reagan, and this is From the South. Thank you so much for joining us. First up, the United States President Barack Obama continued his historic visit in Cuba, where he promised to further improve relations with the island nation. During a televised speech, he said that the people of Cuba would decide the change they want to see in the island. He also underscored the differences that still remain between both governments.
I have come here to bury the last remnant of the Cold War in the Americas. I have come here to extend the hand of friendship to the Cuban people. I want to be clear. The differences between our governments over these many years are real, and they are important.
And President Obama also met with Cuban dissidents at the U.S. Embassy in Havana. The president praised their work and promised to take their concerns into account for U.S. foreign policy. The dissident movement in Cuba is heavily financed by the U.S. government, and WikiLeaks cables have revealed that its leader lacks credibility or support on the island.
Leaders here in Cuba. A few I've had a chance to meet.
And President Obama is now on his way to Argentina. The Foreign Ministry offered a press conference ahead of the arrival of the U.S. President and released his official agenda. Obama will arrive in Buenos Aires tonight. Early on Wednesday, he will leave for Bariloche. A number of protests are set for Wednesday. Foreign Minister Susana Marcora clarified that Argentina is not negotiating a free trade agreement with the U.S., but did not discard the possibility in the near future.
We are not currently discussing a free trade agreement with the U.S., mainly because such a negotiation will have to be discussed also with Mercosur. Because of the bloc's rules, we would have to talk with our partners. For some reason, this was said. I have said it before. We're not currently ready to sign a free trade agreement, but it can be a mid or long-term objective. We're currently trying to improve the commercial exchange between our countries.
Brazilian police arrested dozens of suspects involved in a bribe network at construction giant Odebrecht. Raids were carried out in 9 states, which ended in 43 arrest warrants for temporary detention orders. The Brazilian justice is investigating bribes that were paid out to obtain government contracts. The corporation has also been scrutinized in other countries where it's developing infrastructure projects. Meanwhile, the impeachment commission set up by the lower house sessioned for a second time. The commission has caused controversy as most of its members are in some way linked to the Petrobras scandal, for which they want to impeach President Dilma Rousseff. During a press conference, President Rousseff vowed to fight the efforts to oust her, and it took time to ratify her innocence.
I have not committed any crime under the Constitution and law to justify an interruption to my mandate. To condemn someone for a crime that they did not commit is the greatest violence that can be committed against any person. It is a brutal injustice. It is illegal. I was a victim to this injustice was under the dictatorship, and I fought never to be a victim again under democracy.
4 marches are accompanying a 24-hour strike called by Chile's Workers' Central Union to force the government to fulfill promised reforms. The new labor reform will give more power to workers' unions and has come under fire from the business community. Most of the country's commercial media has also criticized the reform.
It's not just a labor demand that summons us. We need once and for all to make sure the pension system does not withstand more changes. We have to radically change that. We must move forward in a new pension model, no more pension fund association in our watchword, and this should be clearly heard.
During President Obama's visit to Cuba, Secretary of State John Kerry met with delegations of the Colombian government and the FARC rebels who are negotiating a final peace agreement in Havana. The U.S. Secretary of State announced that the rebel leaders will not be prosecuted by Washington. The FARC delegation said that the meeting was fruitful and expressed their satisfaction with the U.S. support given the role that the North American nation has had in Colombia's conflict.
Y hemos recibido de él, en persona, el respaldo.
We have received from him, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, in person, a backing for the peace process in Colombia, which filled us with optimism and which gives us more certainty that we are heading towards peace, because those who financed, advised, and promoted the largest offensive that a rebel group has suffered today has personally expressed the willingness to support us in what we need to achieve peace in Colombia. This fills us with a lot of optimism and gives us security that we will achieve peace.
Nos han expresado personalmente la disposición de apoyarnos en lo que necesitemos.
Rampant violence continues in Honduras. Members of the Lempira neighborhood in San Pedro Sula are fleeing after organized crime gangs issued a 24-hour ultimatum to the residents. Trucks and cars packed with their belongings were seen leaving the neighborhood. A prison riot broke out in the Bolivian city of Cochabamba. Prisoners used sticks and burned objects, defying the prison guards. Witnesses and relatives of the prisoners say that the riot was caused by constant abuse from prison guards. Local authorities are trying to control the situation. Bolivia has one of the highest rates of deforestation in the world, but the government says it will invest millions of dollars in protecting and in conserving parts of the Amazon rainforest in favor of more sustainable development projects. On World Forestry Day, conservationists in Bolivia have warned about the impact that climate change and deforestation are having in the region. Our correspondent in Bolivia, Dimitri O'Donnell, reports.
The devastating effects of wildfires in Bolivia's Amazon region have wiped out huge swathes of pristine rainforest. But the degradation of Bolivian jungle due to deforestation, fires and timber extraction is not just causing damage to the environment. Farmers in the region earn up to 75% of their income from the forest, foraging for Brazil nuts, cacao and the acai fruit. But because of development and wildfires, they can lose everything in an instant.
The fire took us wherever it wanted. We didn't know how to defend ourselves. We have lost a lot. We used to work so hard, but we lost it all in a matter of just half an hour.
Every year Bolivia is losing thousands of hectares of rainforest to development. This affects biodiversity in the Amazon, precious species are lost and people have to leave their land because there's no natural resources left.
Bolivia is one of the highest deforestation rates in the world, like 200,000 hectares of square kilometers per year are being cut down to make way for agricultural lands and mostly cattle ranges.
To mark World Forestry Day, Oxfam Bolivia has launched an online video game to educate children and young adults about the consequences that climate change and deforestation have on producers.
The story of the game is really, if you were a producer in this region, what would you have to do? So you need to buy the plants, you need to buy the animals, then you need to work, and sometimes it can happen, there's a fire, or there's a flood, or there's a drought, and you need to find a solution.
The Bolivian government will invest $30 million in sustainable development programs in the Amazon over the next 5 years. But conservationists say this may not be enough to save the rainforest. They claim by the year 2100, Bolivia's rainforest will have disappeared, transformed into grassland because of the effects of climate change and unsustainable development. For the producers who've lived in the Amazon for generations, their way of life will also be lost forever. Dimitri O'Donnell, teleSur's, La Paz.
3 key states are voting today in the U.S. primaries. Here is Bianca Perez in Washington with more on these key polls.
3 states will be casting their primary votes today on the Democrat side, and 2 states will be voting for the Republicans. Now, as far as the Democratic side, Bernie Sanders is favored to win in the states of Idaho and Utah, both states which hold caucuses, a system that usually favors the candidate, and Hillary Clinton is still favored to win in the state of Arizona. As far as the Republicans go, Ted Cruz and John Kasich have their eyes set on the state of Utah, where if any of them get 50% or more of the vote, they could take all 40 of those delegates. We will, of course, bring you the results as final voting begins to come in. Bianca Perez, teleSur, Washington, D.C.
The self-proclaimed Islamic State group has claimed responsibility for the Brussels bombing attacks earlier today at Belgium's airport and metro station. So far, the attack has killed about 30 people and injured at least 250 more. Belgian authorities say that this claim has not yet been formally verified. The attacks in Brussels happened just 4 days after Salah Abdeslam, a key suspect in last year's Paris attacks, was arrested by Belgian police. And Belgian authorities found a third unexploded bomb at Brussels International Airport, where the twin attacks ripped through the main hall. This is according to the Belgian governor of the Flemish Brabant province, who added that it was later destroyed in a controlled explosion. In another development, authorities have issued a notice for a man suspected of involvement in the explosions.
A photograph of 3 male suspects was taken at Zaventem. 2 of them seem to have committed suicide attacks. The third, wearing a light-colored jacket and a hat, is actively being sought.
After word reached the migrants and refugees in a camp on the Greek-Macedonian border, they expressed sympathy for the victims of today's Brussels attacks. The refugees rejected the terrorist act and hoped that the bombings will not have a negative effect on their goals to reach other European countries. And in light of the deadly attacks in Brussels, the UN's Special Envoy to Syria says that the tragic events show the importance of the ongoing Syrian peace talks in Geneva to counter the growing extremist threat.
We need to find a political solution. We need a political transition in Syria in order to be able to make sure that we can all concentrate, and the Syrians can all together concentrate on what is the real danger of everyone in Europe, in the world, in Syria and elsewhere.
At the 8th annual meeting of Libya's neighboring countries, foreign affairs ministries of the countries bordering Libya met with UN and EU officials. At the meeting, they discussed how to coordinate their strategy to contain the expansion of jihadist groups such as the Islamic State group, which now operates in that country. At the meeting, officials announced that they would accelerate a transfer of the Government of National Accords Presidential Council to Tripoli to render more effective its fight against terrorism. Earlier today, the World Health Organization said that the Zika virus could cause a severe public health crisis around the world.
The virus is currently circulating in 38 countries and territories. On present knowledge, no one can predict whether the virus will spread to other parts of the world and cause a similar pattern of fetal malformations and neurological disorders. If this pattern is confirmed beyond Latin America and the Caribbean, the world will face a severe public health crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to build the knowledge base quickly, very quickly.
Ukrainian pilot Nadia Savchenko has been sentenced to 22 years for her alleged involvement in the killing of 2 Russian journalists during the 2014 separatist conflict. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has laid the cornerstone for the construction of the Hugo Chavez Eyes Hospital. More on this story with Noah Harazin.
The president of the Palestinian Authority, Mr. Mahmoud Abbas, inaugurated the construction for the Hugo Chavez Eyes Hospital in the town of Tormos Aya in the West Bank Monday morning. The ceremony was attended by the Venezuelan ambassador to Palestine, Mr. Maher Taha, and the Palestinian Prime Minister Rami Alhamdulillah. The Venezuelan government started funding for the project during the rule of the late Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez, who was a loyal friend to the Palestinian people and their cause. President Mahmoud Abbas confirmed in press statements that the funds, land and designs of the facility are ready. He said that the hospital will open in March 2017. He was also hopeful that the project will contribute to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian patients who seek medical treatment in the Israeli hospitals.
The late President Hugo Chavez was a fighter and a friend of the Palestinian people. We appreciate this friendship and the joint struggle of the Palestinian and the Venezuelan peoples. His will was implemented yesterday. He reiterated the importance of the construction of the Eyes Hospital in the West Bank during President Abbas's last visit with him. The hospital will be a fixture in the permanent Palestinian-Venezuelan friendship and the symbolic leadership of Hugo Chavez.
Palestinian Authority President Abbas expressed his appreciation and esteem to Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, his government and his people for their ongoing support of the Palestinian people in their struggle against the Israeli occupation until the establishment of an independent Palestinian state on the 1967 border with East Jerusalem as its capital. Noor Harazin, teleSur's TV, Palestine.
On Monday night, gunmen intended to attack a hotel that was being used as a base for an EU military training base in Mali's capital, Bamako. The attackers tried to force their way into the hotel, but the hotel guards retaliated. One gunman was killed as a result. Modern and contemporary art fair Art Basel New Hong Kong opened its 4th year in China's capital with its most global edition. The fair features some of the most impressive art in the world and has record participation this year. Over 230 galleries from 35 countries will be on display for avid art lovers. Modern and contemporary art fair Art Basel Hong Kong opened its 4th year in China's capital with its most global edition. The fair features some of the most impressive art in the world and has record participation this year. Over 230 galleries from 35 countries will be on display for avid art lovers. For more of these and other stories, you can visit our website, telesurtv.net/English. You can also visit our pages on Twitter, Facebook, and on Instagram. For all of us here at teleSur, have a great night.